Our imaginations are a powerful tool. We can think big, wild, and amaze and awe ourselves all within the space of our own minds. And then we try to take those ideas and make them a reality. Hello all and welcome back to the Podcast Corner. If you're a first time listener, my name is Naoki and this show is more about exploring other topics away from my usual, that being of computers or games consoles, electronics and programming, and apparently building mini Dance Dance Revolution cabinets. Although, if you are interested in any of that kind of stuff, you might be curious to check out my YouTube channel, Naoki's Retro Corner, which is available for you to view. Just search for @NaokiSRC on YouTube. And if you're on Twitter, you can also search for the same handle there too. And with that shameless plug out of the way, let's get right into the topic of today, which is dreaming big. And what I mean by that is when we want to do something, whether we're planning for a video or an event or whatever the case may be, our minds run wild trying to think of what we can do, what we can make, and sometimes what we make isn't as good as what we can do in our head. And a good example for me in this scenario is actually, funny enough, my first podcast episode. So when that launched, I wasn't particularly happy. And I mean, I was happy with how it came out in the end because I got it done. But what I mean by that is when I had initially thought of what I wanted to do, it was lacking quite a few things. And also, just to mention it, originally in the first episode, I had said that this was I'm going to try to stick to a bi-weekly schedule. And, well, that kind of went out the window almost immediately. And the reason is quite simple. For the first few times, I had tried to record the episode. And then the third time I tried to record the episode, I got sick. So, wasn't a great example to set. Anyway. So yeah, my first episode. What did I want to do that I didn't end up doing? Well, as I mentioned, if you are following me on Twitter, you might have seen a little while ago, maybe a few weeks ago now, that I put up a post about the first episode and that I was originally going to have an animated video of the Naoki Dragon talking and pointing to various things as he's, we're discussing topics together. That very quickly got shelved, and the reason is quite simple. It was just going to take too much time. So when I do my animations, in my videos, in my Retro Corner episodes, I will typically use Final Cut Pro for all of the animations inside of that. And I rarely do anything inside of Apple Motion. Now, Apple Motion, if you're not aware, is kind of Apple's answer to Adobe After Effects. It does a lot of the things that Adobe After Effects can do, but it's not as good of a program. But I'll tell you what it is good at. Being cheap and away from the subscription service that is Creative Cloud. Because it's only like £50 in the UK on the App Store. So it's a real good purchase. If you've already spent like £1,000 on a Mac, yeah, that big requirement out of the way. So Apple Motion is kind of the Adobe After Effects. And I have bought this program and I wanted to use it more. I wanted to use it more going forward. And one of the problems I have with doing any kind of project is I don't have a desire to do something for no gain. So, if I wanted to learn animation, sure, I could go into Apple Motion and make loads of different animations and then try and get something that's nice and use it on the output. But I don't want to spend my time making an animation for the sake of making an animation. There has to be an end goal. There has to be something I need to use at the end of it, which is really annoying because it does hinder my ability to learn. But I suppose the upside is I'm trying to make most efficient use of my time. I don't know. In any case, I've been wanting to learn how to use Apple Motion more, and I can follow tutorials, but if I don't have a personal project I'm working on, I don't really want to care about it. It's kind of a bad thing, but that's kind of my mindset. So when I originally was thinking of the podcast, and I've been wanting to do this for like two or so years now, I've wanted to just vent out a load of different things at times, and I thought about it, and I figured, this would be a really good way to learn animation skills because I'm going to have the Naoki Dragon in there. I'm going to have him moving about, have the jaw moving, that kind of thing. This gives me something to work towards. I can have, basic background visuals going along because if you're not aware of how podcast distribution works, typically you have like your major platforms like Apple Podcast, Google Podcasts, and those you typically have an MP3 file that is attached to an XML file, and then that gets distributed. You have to upload your XML to all these different service providers. Now, well, first of all, I'll say Spotify doesn't do this, and they really should, because the way they do it is really irritating. But that minor rant out of the way. One of the major platform providers is actually YouTube. Now, YouTube is fine at distributing videos, but the way they do podcast is you have a playlist that is specially marked as a podcast so that it appears in the YouTube Music app, which is also then used for distributing like the audio versions of your podcast. But typically, if you're going to distribute onto YouTube, you're going to have a video that goes along with it. And most people will just upload a static image. I didn't want to do that because that seems like cheap now. It's like you're exporting a 1080p video, so you got the HD audio, for example, and then you're just gonna pair it with, basically an album cover image. Now, there's nothing wrong with really doing that, and ultimately that's what I ended up doing. So why then didn't I animate the thing? Right. Well, it comes down to the fact that when I put all my files together and I started animating, so I made my audio recording, I saved that and I imported that into Apple Motion. I imported my posable Naoki file, it's a PSD file that has all of his expressions, the arms and that are all on separate layers, so I can individually animate them. And what I was going to use, it's called a behavior, and behaviors kind of are an automated way of doing. They're an automated way of doing animation or keyframing. Now, keyframing is when you go through each basically frame or several frames, and then you specify move this part to transform this part to this area, rotate it by X amount of degrees, and then you do that for each frame. And that's obviously time consuming. That will take you probably treble, quadruple the amount of time to animate a video than you would typically spend doing other things. So behaviors comes in and basically specifies you want to do this with this and in this way, and it animates the whole thing for you. So to give you an example, a practical example, as I like doing, I took my audio form and I said transform or rotate even onto the jaw of Naoki and only move it between, I think it was something like 0 and 3 degrees or something like that, something small. But basically what it then does is it goes through, looks at all the peaks of the waveform, and then animates the angle depending on where the amplitude is at that point in time. So that saves me a ton of work. Like, suddenly now he's talking and I'm not doing anything. But then I couldn't do that for the arms. I couldn't do it for the other parts of his body, the head, the eyes. I had to animate those individually because those are related to what I'm saying in the audio in terms of, the topic. He might be looking at a screen, which I'm showing you something, for example. And that was where it was really taking time. I think in the end it took me 3 hours. 3 hours to animate about 30 seconds or a minute. And you can see where I was kind of being lazy with the behaviors, because in the clip I posted on the Twitter post, his mouth actually moves alongside the intro music that I use, because, I just told it to use the entire audio file and I didn't cut out and have an animation overlay him, or I didn't have him move out of shot. So his jaw is just moving to the amplitude of the music, which is kind of funny to look at, but shows me being lazy there. So yeah, it took me a long time, like 3 or so hours to animate just that little short section. And it already takes me enough time to record and edit these podcast episodes to begin with, because the podcast episode might be only 30 minutes, for example, but, I could be recording for an hour. I'd have to spend another few hours cutting that down, and then to spend, I don't know, let's say 3-6 hours on doing a video for one platform for a podcast that's really in its infancy. It kind of doesn't make sense. It's not economically viable to do it because, people always say your time is valuable, and, if you were charging however many pounds, dollars, whatever, if you're spending an inordinate amount of time on whatever you're doing and you're not getting much value from it, then it's not economically viable. And that's kind of where I got up to. It wasn't economically viable to do the animation for the episode, so I canned it very quickly. Which is a real shame, because now I'm back into the problem of I don't have a project to really work on with Apple Motion. The only other thing I've managed to do with Apple Motion is make an intro graphic for another series that hasn't launched yet, and just forewarning, it's not actually launching on my channel, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But now I'm back into the same boat. I can't think of something to do, and so Apple Motion has remained unopened for about 3 weeks now. So yeah, it's really irritating as well, because I'd like to get better at doing it, but I've not got anything to work towards. By the time this episode has gone live, I will have hopefully launched my second part in my building a mini DDR cab series, which is where I actually build the base cabinet, and I really suggest you go watch that. Even if you're not a DDR fan, DDR is also known as Dancing Stage in the UK, and Europe for that matter, up until about DDRX, but that's a tangent for another time. But it's, if you like build videos and you like learning about electronics, you like learning about woodworking, well, I say woodwork in an amateurish sense, then yeah, go have a look at it. But you'll notice in the first few minutes of the video is a 3D animation. It's almost like a homage to Discovery's How Stuff's Made, which in the intro of that it's kind of very basic 90s animations where you see like a spring being made, being cut off, that goes into a vice grip that then grips down on something that is being welded, that kind of stuff. And I really liked that intro. So that's why what I tried to copy with when I made my intro. Now, that was not done by me. Not because I didn't want to do that. It's because I basically couldn't do it. So Apple Motion has the ability to import 3D models. It has the ability to animate 3D objects, have them moving through this field, have the camera pan, do all these fun effects. But the problem I faced was I couldn't get the animation from my mind into the canvas, and that was really bothering me, to the point I was starting to cast doubt on my abilities to edit such a thing. And I wanted to get an animation done so I could focus on the more important things, because at that point, when I was thinking of making the animation and trying to, I hadn't actually built the cabinet. So to give a bit more story behind this, I made a model of a coin, a Neo coin as I called it, and I imported that. I exported that from Fusion 360 as a USDZ file, which USDZ is I don't know if it's an Apple specific format. I know it was helped developed by Apple, and I think, I want to say DreamWorks or Pixar. It's one of the two, but it's kind of what Apple uses. It's an industry standard format. But Fusion 360 does allow you to export from that, which is really nice. So I imported that into Apple Motion, and I tried for weeks to get this coin to fall through the air somewhat believably, because everything else seemed easy. I could get it to roll, I could get it to drop down and have everything else doing it, but I couldn't really get the fall to look nice. It didn't look like the coin was actually falling, it just looked like I'm rotating it. And I tried for ages to get this coin to be, because the problem was it was always spinning off axis. It was the anchor was never in the center of the coin, and I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure it out for ages. And even when I did kind of manage to get the anchor mostly in the center, it didn't look right. It looked like I was trying to make a gyroscope rather than making a coin fall. And this comes into that thing of, I was spending a lot of time doing this, and I could have been working on other things. So in the end, I decided I'll worry about doing everything else, and then I'll come back to this. And then in the end, I decided, look, I'm not going to be able to get this the way I want it to be, and I need to get this done. I still want this coin to fall through, and I still want that animation because it makes sense. So I outsourced it. I outsourced it to a guy. It was off Fiverr, and to be honest with you, he actually said to me afterwards it is his first Fiverr commission, and I'm quite happy about that, quite glad, because he was very professional, very understanding, and very helpful along the matter. So, kudos to him. If I can get the link to go into the description of this podcast, I'll try to put that in there. and he gave me the animation, and all was well with the world. I got the HD version of it, but there's actually a scene that's missing, and that's kind of because of pacing. So when I was in the planning stage of doing the intro, the idea was that I would walk through an arcade cab, come up to a coin slot, and then put in a physical Neo coin into the cab, and then it would go into the 3D shot of it rolling through. But yeah, the live action part of it, that didn't come about because of, well, I'm going to say pacing. The actual reason was I forgot. I forgot to record the me walking through an arcade, and that was more because I couldn't find a decent place to do it. And it was I couldn't find a decent place to do it that wasn't going to be busy. It wasn't. It was going to look good on camera, and was also going to have an arcade machine there. Me putting a coin in wouldn't damage anything, or I had access to the actual coin slot of the machine. Originally, I was going to ask Time Warp Arcade, who are located in Bridgewater, about doing this. And this isn't a dig at anything that they do, but the lighting wasn't great in there. It's completely fine if you're going in there for arcade gaming, and quite honestly, the guys that run it are amazing. So if you're ever down in Bridgewater, please go have a look at them. I'll put a link in the description of this episode. But filming was a problem. Now, I originally used them for... I actually did film there. I did film their cab. I did film me taking it apart and measuring stuff. You can hear the voices of Luke and Steve there. In fact, actually, you can also hear the voice of Bobby Dilly, who makes the excellent OpenJVS emulator for Raspberry Pi. Again, link in the description. But I filmed there. I filmed me standing on a cab, and I also filmed there when I did my System 573 episode. So why now am I saying that the lighting's not good enough? I had an image in my head, and I just wasn't going to be able to make it work because of the way things were there. So between me forgetting and me deciding to, and then, there was quite a few reasons why I ended up not doing it. But what really made the decision was the intro music. The intro music was... So if you've not watched the video, it's kind of like a Eurobeat style music. It's completely original. I made the Eurobeat version a little while ago, and I made the original version many years ago, probably 2019. And the intro of that is like, it has a bit of a vibe going on, and then it goes into a drum roll, and then into the beat. I had about 20 seconds worth of intro, but no one wants to watch 20 seconds worth of intro, especially not after the first video. After the first video, they'll want 5 seconds, maybe even not even an intro at all. So in the end, I cut down the music so that you've only got the intro bit, and then it stops and then goes into the drum roll. And that's kind of how that went to be. But, this is all examples of getting an idea in my head and it just not coming out quite the way I want to. And in my case, there's a lot of times where I think of something grandiose and great, but then I get, reality comes along and it slaps me in the face and says, you can't really do this. And I'm like, oh, come on, let me just do this one thing, please. About the only time it makes sense is if, in the case of, again, the 573 video, is the Ferrari. So the joke there being that, I was presenting in front of a Ferrari that I just happened to have that had almost no relevance to the video except for me saying the Ferrari La Ferrari. And then it transforms into a Micra, which was actually my friend's Micra, who is making a 1.8T swap. So he's basically putting a 1.8 litre turbo engine into a 1990s or late 90s Micra. Again, link in the description. The joke with that one is, like I said, that I was presenting in front of a Ferrari and then it transforms into a Micra. I went so far as to put my reflection in the headlight of the Ferrari, so if you're looking into it, you can see that. And that didn't take me too long to do, but it was kind of one of those visual clues that kind of tries to make you be fooled, but then, obviously, once I've got you fooled, that's the joke. And but that was one of those things, it's like, no, I'm getting this working right, because that's funny to me. But that wasn't that hard to make. Ultimately, it was an image of a Ferrari that I stole from somewhere. I think it was an auction place. And then I basically superimposed myself and the Micra and had that all in place. And that took me a while to record because I had to do 3 takes I had to do multiples of 3 different takes. One with myself in the scene, one with myself in the micro, one with nothing, because I needed all of those to do the composition that I needed. But yeah, it wasn't that much effort to do. So economically, it was viable to do it. So it's kind of irritating to me when I get these great ideas and I start having to think, well, is this actually going to work out? Is this something am I not thinking about? And it's kind of all ironic. And when I say that, I mean with my YouTube ambitions. So to preference this, I'm not trying to say, like, be depressive or anything like that. It's a literal factual thing. I don't want to go big. I mean, if it happens, it happens, and I'll be grateful for, that. But my ambitions isn't to be the next Mr. Beast. It's not my ambition to be someone huge like LGR. Now, if that happened, I'd be terrified of it, quite honestly, because that kind of idea of fame and, having to be thick-skinned and having to, deal with all of the things, like the publicity and stuff that comes from that, I don't really want to do. It's just not my intention. So if I get to, like, I don't know, let's say 10,000 subscribers or something like that, that's more than I ever set to achieve. The fact that I've got, I think it's something around the region of 600 near 630 subscribers. It's kind of ironic then that I'll have big ideas for videos, and then I don't want to have a big audience. So then why do I want to make simple videos for a smaller audience and make more efficient use of my time? And I guess it's just down to the fact of I like to think big. I like to think of things that are like, wow, I can't believe you did that. I mean, when I did the 573 video, that wasn't supposed to be a big information dump of stuff. It was supposed to be me repairing the 573. That's why the end of it had a 573 that was dead. And that was going to be the thing I was focusing on. In fact, I was actually originally going to repair it using a complete circuit board to replace one of the ASIC chips. ASIC standing for Application Specific Integrated Circuit. In this case, it was the ASIC that was designed to handle all of the input and then pass it into the 573. I was going to make a logic replacement for all of this. And to be honest with you, I almost managed to figure it entirely out. I have a prototype PCB which in theory works. I never ended up testing it. Why? I bought a working 573. Suddenly, back to the whole project of I don't have an end goal for fixing this because I've got something that works. So why do I want to bother it? Because, when I fixed it, it's never going to be quite the same. It's not going to be a single circuit on a chip. It's going to be a big mod board, and it was going to look ugly. And it might not have worked. I, quite frankly, didn't want to invest the time. But yeah, tangent on that. In the end, what ended up happening is I made a massive information dump because in the process of trying to make a repair video, I ended up joining a couple of different servers, and one of which was a Bemani server on Discord, and one of which was a PlayStation Development Discord server. And then kind of things spiraled out of control, and then I started doing so much research into a video and then ended up with what you see, because it was just so much more interesting. And because there was so much more going on, I had much more, I had bigger ideas. Like there's a section that is just dedicated to, can you run 573 games on the PS1? Why is the 573 called the way it was? The whole Japanese Goro Awase explanation. So in that sense, my original ambition of not being making a big video turned out to be a big video because of everything that ended up happening because of it. And that will be one of my best videos. I don't think it's going to be the best video ever for my channel, but it's definitely going to be up there. And yeah, that goes on to collaboration. That whole video would not have been possible if it wasn't for people like Spicy JPEG, for SMF of MameDev, and quite a few other people. That whole video was a group effort. Effectively, I made the video, it was all my content there, but a lot of the research came from far smarter people who know about this, the hardware, who know about programming and everything alongside that. And Spicy JPEG is putting more time into the 573 than I think is actually sane, quite honestly. But it's resulted in a lot of information. It's resulted in a lot of new ideas that have come up from it. And like I said, that video that I was going to do was just never going to be as interesting as it ended up being. So I think in that sense, because I was collaborating with other people, my mind was being inspired to do more and more things that, they were all small things I could add. Granted, the video took me like 2 months to make, but it was all small things I could add that made the videos just so much better in the end. And not what I had originally imagined, it was actually better than what I imagined. And I don't think I'll be able to do that again, because even my current DDR cab series, unless someone like Konami themselves are actually going to, start working with me or anything like that, which is very unlikely. But, if they did, that would take a video from, I want it to come out like this, and it's come out slightly less than I imagined, but now it's actually gone out to be more than I imagined. So, who knows? And let's cycle back a bit. Let's go back to, why is it I'm not interested in doing something if there's not an end goal? Why is it then that I will get big ideas and then just, it's kind of like I'm dreaming. I want to do all these things and then I'm just not actually doing them, or I can't achieve them? Well, quite honestly, I think it's down to the fact I'm most likely have got some form of ADHD. I'm not diagnosed. I should actually put myself down on the waiting list, but it's like a 2-year waiting list at the minute. It's not enticing. So me and my partner, we watch a channel called Ice Cream Sandwich, and it's an animated talk show basically. Again, link in the description. And one of his videos was about ADHD, and we were just sat there and we were watching all of his stuff, his animations, his expressions on things, and then we're like, yep, that's me. That's 3 things, 4, 5. By the end of it, we're like, maybe one thing didn't apply to us on each of us, but we were basically like, yeah, we're probably the same if we're very similar minded to this guy and he's been diagnosed with ADHD. I mean, we're both, well, at least I'm super excitable. And when I get a idea in my head or, oh, we could do this, I get right into it. I really go deep, and I will not think of anything else but that until it's either done or I move on and I'm bored of it. And then you couldn't get me to do the same amount of output in that I can do in 2 days in 2 months. I will look at something, let's say a circuit board, and that will be my thing for days and days and days until it's done, or until I get bored of it. And then at which point it might take me 2 months to even make a few traces on the circuit board. It's really, really irritating. I wish I didn't do it, but I kind of can't help it. And it goes into that whole thing of like, when I have an idea in my head of a video, for example, I get really excited about, oh, I could do this, I could do that, and we'll have this going, on here. And then I can't do that. And that just lessens my enthusiasm. And then it kind of drops my will to do the video. Not entirely, but just a little bit. And then I start struggling trying to think of, how do I make it, more approachable? And then, when all of this initial rush is gone, my mind's blank. I can't think of what I want to do. I can have a wall of games, so if I'm not excited for playing a particular game, I don't want to play any game. Even if you've got a big selection, I don't want to know about it, because I won't want to pick anyone up. I might pick up a box and go, that's neat, and then put it back. And I wish I wasn't like this, but I think the only way that I can manage, because, one of the things I want to do about the show is talk about a problem, and then maybe one way, maybe 2 ways of how you can go around this. And I think you can dream big, but just try to keep it realistic. Know your limits. I mean, always push your limits if you can, but, 3D animations, like I said, if you have an idea in your head, like I had the idea of a coin rolling down the coin chute into a validator, into a box, and then falling onto a box of coins, I could describe that in great detail. So why not put that into an email and then send it off to someone who can do that, who is better at doing that than you, possibly, and more importantly, frees up your time to do it. If you can afford to do that, do it that way. And I will certainly be doing a lot more outsourcing, even though it would be a financially unviable way, because I'm not making any money from doing this, but it helps me achieve my vision, and that gives me, a good feeling at the end of it, rather than making something that feels a bit half-baked because I wasn't able to draw that image, I wasn't able to make that animation. So, don't be afraid of outsourcing, and, you might be surprised, because if they can do something better than you can, it might just add that little bit of spark to inspire a bit more creativity. So dreaming big affects not only my YouTube channel primarily and anything creative I do, but it happens with everything. It happens with in my personal life, with my car, with work projects. It can even happen, at any point at home. Me getting involved in a project and going super, super deep, it involves even like work. Let's take an example of work. And in my work, we were trying to find ways of streamlining processes. And one of the things I hated doing was I hated dealing with new starters because there was no formal process really. It was all word of mouth. It was terrible. So I said, look, I'll make you a form. The manager submits. That gets sent to HR. That gets sent to IT. That gets sent to people. We'll use this system and it will make lives easier. And that's what we did. We ended up making a form. We ended up using this system. It's still being used and it has saved everyone a ton of time. But when I got started on that, I could not be stopped. I started on that project and it took like a week or more, partly because I was new to Power Automate and partly because Power Automate is a terrible platform. It's horribly inefficient, but it was something where once I got started on it, I didn't want to do anything else. And that became a problem because part of my job is I'm supposed to look at IT support tickets. I'm supposed to help other people. And here's a fun fact of me being like tunnel visioning. I hate it when someone takes me away from what I'm doing. If I've not gotten to a milestone, I've not got to a point where I can stop, and you try to take me away, I get really, really irate. And it's not fair on other people. And I wish I didn't do that. I'm better at managing it now than I have been, but going back to the topic, it's kind of bad because then I could do 8 hours straight of Power Automate testing, doing all of this form, and I would do that for days on end until I got it working and it got it right. But in those 8 hours, I was supposed to be doing other things too. So that became a bit of a problem. And in the end, what I had to realize is, okay, let's get a milestone. Let's say, get this form, get it read, get it sending an email. Then we'll call it done for the moment. We'll work on other stuff and then we'll come back to it. And then when we come back to it, we can work on other things like, making it more formatted, making it pretty, making it a bit more dynamic kind of stuff. And that's kind of the process I follow with a lot of things. And what's really good about this system is when I get to that point, it's like, yeah, I'm completely content with stopping now. I'll click save, I'll exit, I'll go get myself a drink, I'll do anything else, and I won't care. It will be completely out of my mind. Whereas if I hadn't gotten to that point, you get loads of different like compiler errors, or you get loads of different actual syntax errors. And I'm spending hours and hours and hours working on this, and then I'm still not getting anywhere. Then my partner might come in and say, can you please, make dinner or something like that? And then I just get really irate in the back of my mind. I was like, just give me 1 second. I need to finish this thing. But, it's not going to be 1 second. It's not going to be 1 minute. It's going to be 10 minutes and then it'll be 30 minutes. And that gets really irate. So then why can't I just stop? Why do I have to get to this point before I can stop? Because once I do get to that point, I can stop. I can move on and do other things. But if I was to stop and, be forced to stop, in the back of my mind, it's still, how do I solve that error? How do I solve that bug? All of these things, and it's plaguing my mind, and it's kind of irritating that that's all I want to do right now. It's just, I want to work on that project. Again, setting yourself milestones, probably the best thing for doing that, because it helps you to time manage better. You don't need to make, I wouldn't say, do it, give yourself the milestone of do it within an hour, because, that never works for me, but set your milestones to be something reasonable and set them to be, achievable. Can you achieve this in an hour? Yes? Sure. Go ahead. Do it. So does this end up being a problem in general? Like, is me thinking too big or being too involved a problem? Well, yes, but also no. There's nothing wrong with thinking big, thinking grandiose, because if you can achieve it, then go for it. You don't have, limit yourselves in reality. You're not going to start flying. Not unless your name is Colin Furs and then you start making jetpacks or something like that. But I think take a realistic approach. In your mind, try to figure out what's reasonable. If you can't achieve what your goal is, don't sweat it. do your best. Honestly, people, if you're making videos, for example, people aren't going to care that it's not super perfect. In fact, if you make a small editing error, some people find that funny. Don't worry about that. Worry about making the story, making the actual video, and then, worry about everything else after that, because that's the more important thing. You can feel disappointed for thinking, oh, I wish I could have been able to pull off this stunt or something like that. But in all honesty, if even if you can't, sometimes failure is an option. Sometimes even showing that you weren't able to do something is still a fun story. It's nice, and it's a nice topic to talk about. And I suppose, really, that leads into the final point. It doesn't matter how you imagined it. It really doesn't. No one else is going to be in your mind, so what does it look like to them? Does it look interesting? Does it look amazing? You will end up, if you're making videos, for example, you'll end up looking at the same video so many times that you'll actually get annoyed of looking at it. And you'll notice, maybe there's that pixel up in the top left corner that, comes and goes at times. But quite honestly, no one else will really notice that. You're only noticing it because you know it's there. And kind of like the whole thing of dreaming big. If you dreamed of doing this amazing, wonderful thing, like I said, with the intro on mine, and no one else knew about that, they're going to look at what is actually there and judge what is there. So, don't sweat it. If you can't achieve something, just try to make it work. I think really that's all I have to say on the subject. We can always dream big. We can't always achieve it, but don't sweat it. Do what you can and have fun whilst you're doing it. And really, I think that's the takeaway thing. Have fun. Do what you can. And whatever you make in the end result, that's what's going to be judged anyway. So just make sure that whatever comes out is as good as you can make it. Anyway, that's going to do it for me on this subject. If you have any topics that you might want me to cover, or any questions, feel free to. You can mention me on Twitter at NaokiSRC. I do have a Discord server, which I'll link into the description as well, or should already be linked in there. And feel free to join in the conversation if you have any thoughts or comments about this episode or more. I'd love to hear from you and your experiences on stuff. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode, and if you do, then please share this episode to others who might actually find it interesting. And for every person that you share it to, it helps this podcast to grow, and I really want this to take off, so I'd be very grateful if you can share it. But yeah, that's going to do it for me for now. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you hopefully in the next 2 weeks again, if I don't get delayed or ill or something like that.